Welcome to Give a Shift, the podcast you want to be listening to when you want positive, radical change. My name is Nancy Lee Gribble, and I'm one of your co-hosts.
And I'm your other co-host, Alicia Ziegler.
And Alicia and we are on a mission to bring you stories of inspiration and information to help you create the shifts you need to live a life you love.
Woohoo!
Woo! Welcome, everyone. We are super excited. Today, we have a very special guest, Glenn Lovelace. And Glenn, I'm going to read the bio blurb that I have here, and then we are going to dive into all things. So we're super excited. So for anyone who doesn't know, Glenn is a performance coach for men. He's had over 3,000 one-on-one clients since 2008. And I'm just going to interject when I was reading that. I work with one-on-one clients. That's a lot of one-on-one clients. That's a lot of time devoted. That's amazing. He's been married since 2004 and has 6 kids from 2 to 15 years old. His marriage has challenged him more than anything else, but it has also forged him into the man he's become. Glenn's story bounces from failures, quits, to more failures, much like most men. He found himself in a dark corner 10 Christmas Eves ago, ready to be done. Glenn survived himself. He turned back to the one thing he could control, himself. The gym became an essential part of his daily recipe, and in 2017, he won $100,000 transforming. Glenn lives by the daily simple processes that create lasting value and happiness. He preaches, progress creates happiness, and your goal is my goal. Glenn currently coaches men for his business and has helped men overcome the mind to create ultimate control over emotions, helping men feel it all and still move towards their goal. His unique process looks a lot like the movie Hitch, except we're chasing change and goals. His process has been branded as the Wingman Method. And we're going to go in at the end of the podcast to all the places you can find Glenn. But today we are super excited to introduce you to Glenn. So welcome.
Yay!
Thank you. That guy sounds pretty cool. I'd like to meet him. I need a guy like that.
Cool.
I need a guy like that in my life. Sounds cool.
Yeah, so
whoever wrote that bio, they're hired. That was great.
I know. It is always funny when people are doing your bio. It's like, damn, who is that?
Oh, they sound like they know what they're doing. I better get him on the show.
Well, I'm going to say, with the amount of men that you've coached, I don't think people get it sometimes when you talk about one-on-one coaching, the amount of energy that it really takes for the coach to be there and be present and really help your clients transform. That's amazing. That is no small feat at all. So I have to
Oh no, thank you. I have to, I say your goal is my goal and I mean it. And so I'll carry a lot of those burdens around with me. And I just kind of have to have a process of recharging in the sun and meditation and just trying to get back to my energy too. But it is a lot. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I
100%.
Right? Like you consider, like a therapist, and you're like, I hope you go home and have a self-care practice to kind of not absorb all of that, and you're able to,
Yeah. So with that, that was an overview, but tell us a little bit more detail about your journey from where you were and how you have wound up to the place you are now.
Yeah, no, for sure. The thought that comes to my mind is around coaching. I always thought life coaching was a joke, thought it was totally ridiculous, thought it was weird and just totally not for me. And I remember, I don't know how many years ago, but seeing the Yes Man movie with Jim Carrey in it. Do you remember that one?
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like it's totally making fun of Tony Robbins in my mind. Like, yes, you know? And I thought it was hilarious, but by the end of the movie, I was like, you know what? I could probably start saying yes in my life more. And I picked up some of my old hobbies and did a few things, and it really did help. And I kind of fast forward to 2017, 2018, after I won that contest. It was almost like you have this pit experience and you climb that pitch and you hit the peak.
Yeah.
Well, I hit this peak after all the partying and interviews and all the attention, and I kind of had this thought creep in. It was like, I guess that's the biggest, best thing I'm ever going to do, which was interesting. And so it kind of has this arrival fallacy with goals and big things, but I was kind of in a funk and I was kind of beating myself up like, why are you here again? Like, you just did this incredible thing and now you're right back to a low spot. And once again, I stumbled across Tony Robbins' Not Your Guru on Netflix.
Yeah. Yes.
And I must have watched it 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times in a week because I was just blown away by what Tony could do and the impact in such a short period of time. And there's a couple in that movie that he's coaching. Do you remember where he's talking about the lion and the goat?
I don't remember.
And the lion forgot who he was. Remember that?
I don't. I have to say I don't remember.
So in the story, or in the movie, the documentary, Tony Robbins is at a big event, one of his events, and he's coaching people in the audience. One of them happens to be a couple, and in this audience, this couple is kind of out of harmony, we'll say. So the man has kind of pussified himself by submitting to his girlfriend, his wife, whatever she was, and she had stepped into kind of a masculine role, but wanted him to step up.
Yeah.
And he didn't know how, because, and this is the story for a lot of men, they don't know how to always make their girlfriend or their wife happy. And so they take this weird path of least resistance. They kind of submit and cave, don't have an opinion, don't share their thoughts, feelings, all the things. And so in that line, Tony said something like, heal the boy and the man will emerge. And I just sobbed. Like, for the first time, I was like, I don't know what the hell that means, but that's it.
But it struck a chord.
It struck a big chord. And so from then it was like, okay, I'm gonna invest in myself, go on some more journeys. And that would be kind of a fun way to intro what we're going to talk about today.
So that catapulted your coaching career, but this came long after the 10 Christmases ago.
Yeah, so I started coaching in 2008.
Okay.
In 2013 was my dark night Christmas Eve type experience. Literally had a gun in my hand. Like, it was honestly a pretty empowering experience. Like I wasn't afraid. That's what kind of freaked me out a little bit. It was almost like a very raw and powerful moment. But in that moment, I thought of my kids. And I thought, if I give up on them, if I quit on them because I can't handle, my shift, if I can't handle my stuff, how are they going to navigate life knowing their dad couldn't even hack it? And so that was a big turning point where I was like, okay, what is going on and how did I get here? And the sad truth was, or my truth is, not so much sad, but I realized that I wanted to hurt myself so that I could hurt my wife for all the things I thought she was hurting me with. Now, that's a pretty dark realization to have.
Yeah.
And then to go back out from that experience, kind of take control of who I am and who I want to be, and stop being the guy that's in the audience with Tony Robbins, who's just getting pushed around, taking this path of least resistance, trying to make his wife happy all the time. And then learning that my job is not to keep her happy. My job is to show up authentically as myself. And it was just a whole journey of like, what does that even mean? Kind of reclaiming, myself and doing it in a way that would, kind of match with the person I already am, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank God for the gift of whatever that insight was, that moment that allowed you to think about your kids, because we can pick up the paper or I guess we just read it digitally now, but you can read every single day about the person, right, that didn't have that secondary thought. And And a lot of it you can tell is kind of along that same lines. I mean, you can almost feel it. It's the harm that this person just did to themselves and maybe their family was to hurt others. So thank God that not only that light, however, came to you, but also now what you're doing with it and sharing the message and things like that. When you got to that dark place, what was, again, you were saying to like kind of get back, what was kind of happening in your life that got you to that moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've had injuries my whole life. Like I'm over 20 surgeries right now, just putting myself back together because I love adrenaline. Like I just chase it all the time. At the time, I was working 3 jobs, and so we built a house in 2007. We ended up getting in a lawsuit over it. So the contractor was on city council. He was also my next door neighbor over my fence. And we went to church with this guy. And so he's like pretty respected in the community. And he sold us something that wasn't zoned for the use that we had intentions of. So he kind of told people what they wanted to hear, whether it was the city, us, inspectors, all the things, and he just played all of us. And if I was the only one, then it'd be like, dude, you're the idiot here. But there was 3 other families that got involved too. So from 2007 to November of 2011, I was suing the guy, and I was working 3 jobs trying to afford something I couldn't afford because it wasn't what I had intended to buy. And essentially, we wanted to have an apartment in our basement.
Yeah.
And it wasn't zoned for that use. It was obvious, like if you check city records, totally my bad. But first time home buyer, all these situations, I trusted this guy. It was a mess. So November 2011, I put the keys on the counter. We walk away, we become renters again. And then a year later, I lost my primary source of income. We literally had the FTC come in with guns. It was crazy. So my boss at the time was involved with a tax company. That tax company was doing bad business, and the FTC just came in and shut anyone down that was associated with this tax company, if that makes sense. So I'm working at UPS from like 2 to 8 a.m. Then I'm running fire and EMS calls with a pager, and then I have my full-time coaching job. And so I was just like savings, blew it all in a lawsuit, moved out, was starting to rev things back up to reclaim my savings and safety net. And then I lost my job. And then all throughout this, I was just emotionally inadequate to be married, especially to Amber. She's just such a rock and such a strong, like powerful woman. And so it just kind of created this storm. Then if you add a little bit of weight, injuries, stuff like that,
obviously
never
no
being
sleep.
Yeah, no sleep. I'd never been a dad before, and I probably had 2, almost 3 kids by then. And so just lots of new things that I didn't know how to handle culminated into I left the house in Arizona where we were at for Christmas, and I'm like, I'm just gonna drive home. And I'm like, that'd be dumb. You'll just have to turn around and come home. So I just went out in the desert. I was probably on some Indian reservation. Pulled over, my gun was sitting there, and it was like, finish it, be done. And I was like, that sounds like a vacation. Let's go. So I'm pretty open about talking about these things. Hopefully it's not too much. I think people appreciate that. But that's the short version of the storm that had kind of brewed up in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I know we both do. We appreciate you talking about it and sharing it because I think more people have the thoughts than will ever admit. So,
sure.
Normalizing it in a way, like in that, hey, you might have the thought, but let's not act is a great thing. Oh, what are we seeing?
I don't know if
that's
I mean, we're on a podcast, so most people probably won't see this, but I'm holding up a frame. Okay, cool. If you guys want to see what I'm holding up, it's kintsugi. It's a Japanese pottery. Have you guys heard of kintsugi? I imagine.
I have. You can explain it to those that can't see.
So this may or may not be my book cover, and I'm not trying to plug that or anything. But the idea is that as men, our brokenness creates weakness in our lives, and it creates, thoughts that aren't really serving us. With kintsugi, it's intentional breaking. And the more breaks, the more valuable this piece is. And what's ironic is the more breaks and fractures, and once you put it back together, the stronger it is too. So part of that story that we just talked about, it's like that could bring a lot of shame. That could bring a lot of grief and sorrow and guilt. Or I can just step into it and be like, yeah, I did that. I survived all that. Those are the broken pieces of my past. But look at how valuable it's made me as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a wingman, whatever. And I'm so much stronger for having gone through that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%. I think there's a power in that. And I think a lot of times, there's when you're a coach, a lot of people assume certain things, right? Like, well, if you haven't been in my shoes, then you don't know. But there's so many scenarios where I could say that may not be the case for you, but I've been in something equally of desperation or isolation or scare, fear, whatever it is. And I feel like the more that you've been through that you can bring to the table, irregardless of this, specific circumstances, is so telling on what you have to offer as a coach, right? Like Nancy and I have completely different backstories, but we can help one and the same individual. And I am sure that men must gravitate to you knowing that you have really triumphed like over and over and over again. And you are still, for those of you that are only listening, poor Glenn's face looks like he was in a bar fight last night. So the man is a testament to like continuously getting back up is huge. And I think that's
kind of like another dumb, it's like another Jim Carrey movie, Liar Liar, where he's in the bathroom and he's like, I'm kicking my ass. Do you mind? He's like patting his head.
I wish when I had met Jim, I'd been like, by the way, I know this guy, Glenn, you guys should hang out.
Oh my gosh. No, I had I'm in the void of another breaking moment where last June I broke my neck in 3 places, broke my back, broke my ribs, broke my left arm in 3 places. I just had my 4th elbow surgery. And it's like that was full stop financial, relationships, my health, like everything was full stop because they wanted to fuse me, and I just went against all the doctor's orders, and I'm like, I'm not getting fused. And they're like, if you get bumped, you could be paralyzed or die. And I'm like, I guess I won't get bumped then. And I laid in bed for 4 months, and I'm still trying to come out of that. And so whether it's physical, mental, emotional, relational, there's lots of breakage that can happen in our lives, whether it's our own bad choices or the impact of other people. And you're right, Alicia, where it's like, as a coach, you kind of develop this empathy muscle where it's like, I don't know what it's like to go through that exact same thing, but I do know what it's like to be human and have these dozens, if not hundreds of emotions. And so that's kind of my goal or mission, is to expand the experience that men are having, to allow them to put adjectives to what they're feeling so that their life almost like blossoms. So a lot of men, we love comfort, we love consistency, we love control. And so when I look at kind of the emotional expansion of men, depending on the guy, he kind of has this 24-hour clock where he revolves in this little window that he can control. Women, and physiologically, your hormones are changing every 30 days.
I was like, every 30 seconds? Yes, Glenn, I hear you.
Like whatever your day count is, right? But it's like your roller coaster is totally different than ours.
Yes, it is.
And, and so what I'm trying to do is tempt guys to come outside of that, because the lower the lows, I believe in the higher of highs. So it's like, once you realize it's just an emotion and it can't kill you, then it's like, yeah, let's start expanding. Let's start adding these adjectives or emotions that, Alicia, you were talking about. And so with coaching, those coaches that you want to work with have the tools to help you experience that, regardless or irregardless, as you said, whether they've been through that same exact scenario or not. The tools work.
And you had mentioned that Amber, your wife, was a huge catalyst for a lot of the up against that you were having, correct? So that seemed that was one of your biggest, was that your biggest, as Oprah would say, aha moment? Or
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be hard to say that's the biggest one, but the biggest person, absolutely. I kind of have this avoidant attachment style. She's more anxious, where it's like, let's get this thing done. And
I know nothing about that. Keep going.
I can't even imagine. I know, but it, I kind of had to change my thinking about this, where it's like the elevated, passionate women are the fun ones. like it's a full package deal, you guys. Yeah. But you've got to level up your thinking. So if Amber and I were fighting, for example, I felt disrespected. If you know anything about how you feel, it leads to how you act and show up, the things you do and the things you don't do. So if I felt disrespected based on her actions and my thinking about what she was doing and saying and how she was doing it, and my judgment towards anger, now all of a sudden I'm the one showing up disrespectful. Do you think of like John Gottman's Four Horsemen?
Yeah.
It's like I'm all of them because I feel disrespected. But the minute I flipped the script to say she's not fighting me, I changed the thought, and miraculously it was, she's fighting for us.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden I could create space, I could breathe, I could take care of myself, I could handle whatever she threw at me. And then I started creating boundaries around what I would allow based on what she was doing. And again, like I said, she's such a rock star. She very rarely would present with those four horsemen. Do you guys know the Four Horsemen by chance?
I've heard of it.
It's stonewalling, criticism, defensiveness, and contempt. And so now I've made it permissible to be angry while also creating boundaries around what I will allow or not allow because of what my rules are for myself. And then if she steps over the line, I can make a quick request. Hey, if this continues, then I'll need to step away for 10 minutes. I'll be right back. And what's crazy is now she's the one stepping away and I'm just sitting there like, let's go.
Let's figure this thing out.
Let's figure this thing out. And
so I'm going to leave right now so that I don't say anything I can't take back. And I will be right back and we can finish this conversation. Because all the things I'm thinking are not things I think I should be saying.
No, exactly. And don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not the strong one, but I've definitely come up closer to her level now. And now it's like a workout. Like, Alicia, when was the last time you couldn't walk after leg day? Has it been a while or?
Right. Yeah. Well, it was like 2 weeks ago with my like 185. Yeah. Deadlift. And then I was like, oh, this is rough stuff.
Total. But the next day, what did that mean about the workout when you were all sore, right?
That was a darn good workout.
A darn good workout. And so for men, I just bridge the gap to uncomfortable conversations. I say, look, you're walking across the threshold into the gym. You're about to get rowdy. And this is going to make your relationship stronger, or it'll make you stronger, but you have to change the way you think and look at this same situation if you're wanting to build something beautiful with this person, or if you're wanting to build something you're proud of in the gym. It's the same bridge. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Because I think that's it. It's very much the same. There's beauty in the breakdown. Like if you don't break down your muscle, you're never going to get the beautiful physique that you're seeking. Like the challenge, the bottom, the ugly and the gritty and the going there and having, blood, sweat, and tears can really create a miraculous relationship. But I think a lot of times there's such an unwillingness or like this thin veil of like, I know, but if and it's like, but if you don't, if she's a powerhouse, she's probably going to leave you in the dust. If you're not married, if you're married, she'll fight for you only for so long, or all of a sudden you're going to realize she's been checked out by the time you get back.
And that's kind of where my coaching has gravitated towards, where it's like, hey, Glenn, what do you do? And I'm like, I coach men whose wives have transformed from coaching, therapy, and counseling. And they're like, oh. And so when I tell that to women, they're like, where the heck have you been? Like, because they've been doing all this work And there's so many situations here, and so it's hard to capture all of them. But let's pretend you're the gal who's transforming through doing the work, and then your husband or boyfriend's sitting on the couch comfortable.
Yeah.
You might start holding back your progress because you don't want to create a bigger divide in that relationship, or you resent him for being so comfortable about the stresses of life. He's not even engaged.
Yeah.
Or he's sitting on the couch like, she's always leaving me behind and she's not bringing me along. And now he starts to have resentment, even though his life's getting better and easier because she's doing her work. And kind of a fun story, I may have shared this last time, but kind of a fun imagery is that women that I am coming across they're out deep sea diving, they're swimming with dolphins, petting sharks. They're like way out in the deep, and they're doing their work, and they look for men, and where are men? They're back on the beach, playing in the sand, living in like this little comfort zone that they've created, kind of what's the country song? Beer in your hand.
Oh yeah.
I know the song and it's losing
I know, why
me.
is it escaping me? I probably know the lyrics too.
Toes in the sand, beer in my hand, something like that, right?
Is it Kenny Chesney?
Yeah, that's totally it. We'll play it later.
So.
But
Yeah, I'll find it.
That's kind of the people that I'm attracting and working with. That's one of the scenarios that I run into, and it's like, guys, this thought, emotional, being vulnerable but still feeling like a man. You don't have to go pet sharks and become a coach or go to all these conferences, but at least get in the water with the gal you've set up life with, and be a player and be present. Be a player, meaning play by the game that she's playing by, so that you guys can stay connected. And what men don't realize is it's not that scary, it's not that hard, and it totally leads to like crazy intimacy. And I don't just mean sex, I mean intimacy in all of its fashions.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't even know what your gal is waiting to give you until you can connect with her in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense in different arenas, but like a lot of the women that we'll work with who are in a weight loss or body comp change goals, as they're going for their goals, like they might have been at this level with their husband and he's still, eating the snack wells and watching TV every night, and she wants to work out. And now as she's getting fitter and healthier, she wants to go do more. And he doesn't want to do more. And one of the things that you say actually happened, either she starts regressing again and getting resentful at the same time, or she takes off. Or bitches a lot. but it is too. And I imagine for you work, like we're obviously working with something, on this tangible, but with men, it's a very mental that you have to work with them to like say, hey, catch up with the woman. And also I was thinking, I know I'm a little long-winded here, kind of to backpedal. The thought came to my head, that song, Happy Life, Happy Wife. And you're kind of course you want your wife happy, but you're kind of coming in and saying, yes, happy wife, but you've got to be a man and you've got to stand up. And it's not just like placating her and being like, okay, do what you want. Because he's going to die internally too doing that.
That's exactly what happened to me. So I was trying to avoid the confrontation, the connecting, turning towards conversations, call it nagging, whatever you want to call it. I was certainly falling short, and she was letting me hear about it, and then I wasn't changing. But yeah, it became happy wife, happy life. How do I say yes so that I can get back to what I want to do? But really, you're giving yourself up. And so it's just this really messy situation where both people are not winning in that kind of a situation. If one person, and that's where gals I think are turning into the masculine side, where they're taking charge of the household, so to speak. And that's fine. Like Amber is like 100% masculine, and it's great. But we've had to really kind of create scenarios where she can go take a bath, for crying out loud, while I take over. And we're still figuring out how to help her, step into that feminine side a lot more. And that requires me stepping up. And so, I mean, there's so many directions to go with this, but yes, when one partner is transforming, it's very easy for the other one to start sabotaging the results and growth. because it's a change in the relationship. So that change in circumstance is going to challenge that relationship. So I will coach men who are coming to me and their wife hasn't done any coaching, but typically they come in the door for making more money, getting in better health, building muscle, that kind of thing. And what's great about that is there's very clear metrics on whether your bank account's going up, your body fat's going down. But when it comes to a relationship, it's like, what metric is there for men to kind of logically concede if they're being successful? And it's like, okay, are you arguing less? Are you like, you're still married? I guess that's a success metric, but that doesn't mean anything. And
No,
it's like, is it the frequency of sex then? And it's like, who wants to track that?
right.
That feels like duty sex or disingenuine and all these things. And so if people aren't exposing themselves to new tools, vocabulary, they're going to create scenarios unintentionally by their progress. Like these gals you're talking about, they're like, hey, I'm ready to make some changes. And you've got to realize that, yes, this is getting better, but that's going to impact this area over here. And there's just no way out of it. It's just crazy. It's kind of frustrating, to be honest.
Well, it's interesting too, because it's like it's such a dance. And I'm just gonna say this for the guys that are listening: we're only hard asses because we love you. That's it. I'm single right now, but like that's it. We're not trying to be an asshole, but we love you, and that's why we're so diligent on being like. And we get harder over time because we think that if we get harder, maybe it'll sink in. But we realize we learn too. Don't worry. When you snap, we're like, oh, that didn't work. But
Right.
that being said, I do want to ask you, because you are a coach and this is your space and it's your jam. I find it interesting, and Nancy, you tell me too if you've heard this, but they always say, right, well, just keep working on you. Don't press your partner. Don't impress upon what you've learned or you heard or the exciting change that you've had. Like, just wait and kind of see. And you're like, well, like wait and see how long. Because let me tell you, like I already been in this for a long time, and that didn't happen either. And now you want me to like just like come home and naturally change my behavior, but like don't say anything.
Right.
You're like,
no, it's
I'm like on fire. It's like coming home and being like, but I walked on fire with Tony Robbins, and you don't want me to tell anybody?
Right. No, totally.
Just wait and see what happens. If you're like, do you notice my difference? It's like, really? It's a dance. Like I'm not gonna like rock it solo in my kitchen.
I know.
It's weird.
I had a sex therapist on my podcast a week or two ago, and we titled the episode "From House on Fire to Burning Desire" or something like that.
Nice.
And it was. We get about as spicy as this Utah kid can get. You know what I mean? Like,
what's the name of your podcast? Plug it really quick.
The One Day One Life podcast, and the subtitle is "The Art of Transformation Stacking."
Nice.
So, but what you're explaining, Alicia, is this environment of how do I create uncomfortable conversations properly, comfortably, somewhere where he can handle it and not avoid it. And what's funny is the gals I've worked with call me the ultimatum coach, and the guys call me the wingman coach for a very specific reason. It's like, hey, these ultimatums are coming your way if you don't decide to hop on. And I'm amazed by most women because they are so patient to a fault. And if they just see an inkling of progress and some effort, you're in the lane of what all they're asking for.
Yep.
They're not asking you to go deep sea diving. They want you to put the toe in the water and be like, hey, there's nothing here to be afraid of. But what men are kind of experiencing is this attack on masculinity and toxic femininity and all these buzzwords, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on how many rabbit holes you want to go down.
All of them.
But all of them. Okay.
Let's go.
But it's like,
come on.
It's like food is designed to be addictive.
Yes.
It's designed to lower your energetic vibrations. It's the conspiring hearts of men trying to gain power and money. It's in music, in our rhythms. It's in the news. It's in the movies. And so until you can recognize what the lies are and what the truth is and what the intentions are behind breaking up men and women and kind of making this war against it, it's like we're always going to be afraid of these emotions, because as men we don't know how to be a man in this modern world. And it sounds kind of silly, but it's like, gals, the number one thing I believe you can do, and I have like this truths and strategies document that I'll send out, but the number one is inspire your man by the work and progress you're getting from coaching, therapy, counseling. So it's like, make it undeniable that this crap works.
Yeah.
Because if you continue to show up different and that doesn't inspire him, I mean, yeah, you got some tough ultimatums to create. And I'm not saying, maybe it starts with sleeping in the other room. Maybe it starts with asking them to move out. Maybe it is like divorce paperwork. But the problem that women are running into is that's not what they actually want. And so to create a ultimatum with a heavy consequence, now the guy doesn't stand up, step into the game. And now it's like, in order for you to keep your integrity, now you have to sign the paperwork. And it's like, that's not actually what she wanted. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So you're in this really tough spot. Have you heard about the dog on the nail on the porch? You heard that story?
No, but I'm going to go rescue the dog.
Yeah. So there's this guy walking.
The dog, Glenn.
There's a guy walking through town, and he hears this dog like moaning. He gets up to the house. He sees an old man and a dog. And the dog's just whimpering and howling. And he's like, "Dude, what's wrong with your dog? Aren't you going to help him?" Like, "Well, no, he's just sitting there on a nail." He's like, "He's sitting on a nail?" And he's like, "Yeah." And the analogy is, it's going to hurt for that dog to get up, and it's going to hurt if he stays there.
It's one in the
so
same.
for women or men, for you not to change, it's going to be painful. So if we're not happy with our health, we're obese, we have all these medications, we have a hard time putting our socks and shoes on, like our kids are no longer asking us to go outside and play, our friends don't call us, it's affecting our intimacy and our confidence and all the things, right?
Yeah.
That's very painful, but if you stay there, it's only going to continue. But to get your ass in the gym, that's really painful too. Like, think of all the thought problems that people have, and people are looking at me and whatever, like, it's just endless. And so it's like, it's going to be painful either way. But once you accept that, then it's like, which pain do I want to pick? And I can become an agent rather than a victim.
Yeah.
And I think there's an override button, right? It's like being in the pilot, you got to put in an autopilot. Like I was thinking that my whole run this morning was, my back hurts. I don't want to go. I'm running out of time. Get going. I almost justified, like, well, by the time I get back, I might not have night. I was doing the whole thing, and I was like, just shut up and go. Just go. And like, I'm in, and I'm like 4 miles, and I'm like, and you know what? Just for bitching, you should do an extra mile, because guess what? You can today. And then you go through the whole thing, and you're like, oh my God, that was so great. But it's like, if you don't do the work and invest in yourself, you're never going to know how freaking amazing you can be, or how much you can excel, or how deep your relationships can get. And I mean, I don't know Nancy's situation with Wes a lot, but like, they have a really cohesive, great, complementary dance that they do in their relationship, and the way that they speak to each other, and she's honest and it's like, that's what we're going for. It's like, all of that space should be the hard work with good conversation that leads to the intimacy. And here we are. But like, I don't know what world we're living in, where everybody thinks that everybody's immune to like having to, one, do the work, or two, doesn't have shit that they've been through, or is expecting like expectations of other people. Like, well, you should see me like this. And like, should I? What makes that so? Right? Like, I don't know. Vince?
Yeah, it boils down to the very simple statement, right? Choose your hard. There's the hard of doing the work and the hard of not doing the work. But I am curious. One, thank you for the Wes and I plug. He'll be very happy.
It's pretty. I'm pretty. I was like, it's a little textbook. I like it.
And, not to say we haven't had a lot of practice not doing so well in other arenas, but I wonder, like, when men hear this, like, if there's a little bit, like, when some come to you, I think when we spoke last time, you're like, you do not allow the wife to hire you for the man, right? He has to come to you on his own. Otherwise, right, there would be this little rebellion. And I'm wondering, even if they come to you, there's like a little rebellion, like, why do I have to change because she wants to change? Like, if I'm going to be a man, shouldn't I be able to say, I'm not going to do this? Do you ever get that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was talking to a gal the other day. Her husband has an addiction. He's a great guy. And his comment is, you picked me. Almost like, hey, you knew what I was when we got together, and now you're trying to change me.
Yes.
And as I was coaching her, I was like, hey, is the problem the addiction or the behaviors that seem to be tied to the addiction? And she's like, it's the behaviors. She's like, I don't have problem with alcohol, weed, whatever it is.
Right.
She's like, but I do have problems with the behaviors that tend to be coming from it. So if I were to reach out to this guy and talk to him, I would be like, look, this is kind of the problems you're running into because of your behaviors. If you can keep stuff together, you don't have to give up or change who you are, but you do need to change how you treat the people in your house. And if you can do that, then she doesn't have a problem with that, but she's connected the problem to the habit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned gals wanting to like pull out their credit card, drop their husband off at Glen Daycare, and just have them like transform. It's like
the Lovelace Center. How can we help you?
Yeah, it's like,
oh my God, this would be great.
It's like, hey, is there a medication for this guy? So, but yeah, the men have to be bought in, and I can tell right away what they're doing. It's almost like the movie Hitch, where you have that sleazeball who just wanted to have a rebound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, men, are you doing this to appease your wife, or are you really doing it to change? And the other reason I want to take their cash, their Venmo, their credit card is so that they have the buying experience of going all in on themselves. Does that make sense?
100%.
It's part of the emotional process and experience for me, and it's very intentional to be designed that way, because stuff is going to get hard, and I take the money all up front, because in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, when you're working with me for a year, it's going to get boring. Like, you're going to be in the consistent day-to-day grind of it, and you're going to think it's not working, and you're going to want someone to blame, and that person's going to be me. And I'm telling them all the way through this, hey, this is the gap, this is the void, this is the valley, like, this is the trenches of actually finishing something you start. And so there's a whole journey when people buy into, an experience that has a result at the end, and to rob them of that just sets it up to where it's like, this is not going to work if your wife is bringing you to daycare. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Listen, first of all, I couldn't help really just have this image of like the drive-through, dropping them off, and then calling and going, hey, could you groom them before I picked them up?
Yeah, absolutely. I got a razor. We'll fluff up the beard.
But it is very busy.
It is crazy though, because if women are taking a motherly role with their husband, is that healthy? No. Or if women are the child in the relationship, where they have to have their husband give them permission to do every little thing, it's like, that's not an equally yoked relationship, even though we're talking about a man and a woman. Does that make sense? So
100%.
When I think of men and women, I think of the oxen being yoked together, and 2 oxen can pull, 3 times what 1 oxen or 2 oxen can pull, because of that energy. And so I think that's kind of a powerful, I don't know, imagery around if a husband and wife are doing life together, or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the situation is.
Yeah. Definitely. We hear a lot of, I have to get permission. And I'm like, oh, can we shift that word? Like, permission, I understand if you need to discuss, but like the permission thing is definitely one that I'm like, oh no. And I had what I thought was a brilliant question, and I can't remember it now.
Oh, sorry.
It's coming back. It's coming back.
I love relationships that are not jealous, right? Like,
yes.
I want to run it by them to keep them in the loop, but just so you know, like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I'm just actively including you in the process and the timeline.
Yeah.
And that's not the norm, probably.
No.
Probably not the norm. Yeah.
It's definitely not the norm. And
it's very
I think a little bit it might be coming more, and as I think financially is where like it can get gray area for people. So discussions should be made even prior if one's not going to work or something, how that plays out. I knew what I was going to say. It probably wasn't that brilliant, but when you were saying you work with people for a year, and it's when that time gets boring. And the first thing that came to my mind is, and that's when people normally give up. It's even when we're working with people, I call it the valley of despair. Like you're doing everything right. You're doing all the things. And your body's like, I just don't think I'm going to budge today, a month, 3 months. And you are like, F it. What's the point of this? And it's like, you have to get through the valley of despair. And that is where having a coach, someone like you that knows what that looks like, is just, I think, makes all the difference in the world. And then they get over it and they move on.
Yeah. Great, I'm calling you for my acting career because I live in the valley of despair and I'm always waiting for the breakthrough. So anybody.
I have the best story for this too. So have you heard of the story 3 Feet from Gold and Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill? Do you remember that story?
I know the book. I don't remember the story.
Yeah.
Okay, so the quick version is a guy from the East Coast wants to go to the gold rush. This one happens to be in Colorado. He buys all the things, the property, and he goes out there and he hits gold. And he starts following a particular strand. He's doing really well. And then all of a sudden that strand completely ends. Okay. He ends up quitting, essentially. The story goes on, all the things he's running into. He basically goes home with his tail tucked as a loser because he gave up. And he ended up creating one of the most successful insurance companies at the time, apparently. I always forget that part of the story. Like, there is a good ending for him. But the guy who took over the project hired like a geologist, let's say. And he's like, oh, there's a fault line here. And he's like, the gold strand picks up 3 feet from that spot. Sure enough, the guy digs down, boom, blows up. So when I was doing that contest in 2017, I kid you not, I was 3 weeks away from being done. And I talked to the gal who won it the year before. Do you remember Charmaine, Alicia?
Yeah, I do.
So she called, I somehow got her on the phone and we were talking. And I was like, Charmaine, like, my body's just not going to get from here to there in 3 weeks. Like, I know what it's going to take to win this thing. And I said I was going to win it, and it's just not going to happen. My marriage is a mess right now because of all the time I'm taking to do this thing. And she's like, what if you just finished for yourself? And I was like, okay, that sounds sweet and nice, but yeah, I like that.
I like 100 grand better, but
I'm like, I made promises to everybody that I was going to take this thing down. And what was really cool is I recognized that I was in my own 3 feet from gold experience. So it's like, when you're talking about the valley of despair, it's like, this is not the time to quit. This is actually the time to double down.
Yes.
So instead of just doing my plan, I attacked it like I was life or death. And what was really cool is instead of finishing on the day and then eating pizza and all the things, I'm like, I'm going to work until they show up with my check. Like, I'm not stopping until they show up. And then sure enough, they showed up with my check. And it was just a really cool buy-in experience to recognize where you are in that transformational process, the hero's journey, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, look, if you have a big goal of losing 100 pounds and you've never done that before, how much time do you need to give yourself so that you can take off that being in a rush attitude? Because once you pick up that being in a rush, my life will be better over there, like the results start to slow down, and then you get stuck in this like suffering phase, if that makes sense. So if
Yeah.
that helps listeners kind of think of that 3 feet from gold, and then try to activate some type of double down mentality where it's like, no, like Alicia said earlier, it's like, no, you're going to run another mile,
Right.
and not out of torture, but because
No.
of love and accomplishment and discipline and building that consistency muscle, because you want to make yourself proud and you want to be disciplined. My unique kind of definition of discipline is doing what you say you're going to do. It's the ability to obey yourself, especially when motivation is gone. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so it's like by exercising on a consistent basis and then doubling down, it creates the results automatically. You just have to keep pushing through.
You really do. And like I said, I made the joke about acting, but it's so true, right? Like think they always say, look how many people quit and they throw in the towel. And it was like that next one could have been the one, the job that you had been trying to get for 20 years or whatever it is. And it's like the same thing. Like I think and guys are always like, God, she's so hard on me. It's like because she sees so much potential in you. She's not saying she's perfect and she doesn't need to do something, but she loves you so much that she's like, I just want to break the vase and glue it back together.
Oh, totally.
Invest in that relationship and like just waiting for the breakthrough, right? And my mom always says you got to have the breakdown to have the breakthrough. And it's like that my willingness to do 4 was my breakdown, and that 5th one was my breakthrough. And I'm like, look at how pretty the trees are and the sun's out and ooh. But it's like it leads to a euphoria. And I think that's where the shift comes. That's where you're like one day at a time. It's like it really is. It's just a consistent one-day investment of self and what's important to you. If the relationship matters, then show that it matters. If you matter to yourself, treat yourself act as if right now we're not waiting. We're like, we're going to get up and nourish the body. I mean, your weight loss was incredible. I mean, to put it on, it must've been hard, but to get it off is equally as hard. It's like, but that's a self-love thing.
Yeah. I had a hernia surgery the November before, and then I had bilateral carpal tunnel done as well. And so when I started that contest, I couldn't even do a push-up. So it was kind of like 2 surgeries, that 10, 15 holiday pounds of weight, and then rolling into that competition. It was just like the storm was set, and it was like awesome.
And how many weeks was it?
It was 12 weeks, but if you started on the first day, it was actually 14.
14.
They gave you 2 weeks to register, and so day 1 I was attacking it. So
that's amazing. I love that.
So it was so wild. It was such hell. It was crazy.
See?
The night before, my Amber was really ticked off because I was on social media. Like I was really big on trying to support everybody and cheer them on, and I did the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I played the game very, very well, and she was sick of it. She was so fed up. She was pregnant again, and she basically said, "Hey, I don't know. It's something in the water."
Okay.
So she's like, "Hey," because I had planned for some professional pictures. I'm like, "Hey, if I'm gonna win this thing, I want to show off what I actually got going on and give myself a chance." And so she's like, "Hey, just forget about me going tomorrow. I'm not gonna go." And I said, "Well, I kind of wanted this to be like a family thing." And I said, "Look, I wasn't very well versed in communication at this point yet, but I handled it really well. I just said, hey, I want to finish together. I'm going to wake up, get the kids ready. We'll be ready in the car. And if you come down, we'll go. And if you don't, then I'm not going. I'm not going to finish without you." And it was a really powerful experience for me because I put it all on the line. Like, hey, in my mind, it was like this relationship and her feelings matter more than, posing in my underwear, you know what I mean? And showing off what I had been able to accomplish. And, as the story goes, she did come in the car. We got pictures. there's a fun picture of all of us like kind of yelling. The kids are all over Dad's back, and it was really cool. And then to have the check show up later was just a really nice ribbon on the story, if that makes sense. But yeah, you really do have to put things on the line. And so if you're in a relationship that is challenging, it is scary to put it on the line and be like, look, this is what my requests are.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you share what the consequences are to those requests. Some people call them boundaries. I think boundaries are a whole nother level of requests and consequences in relationships. But it's like you have to figure out where those requests are going to be, and then you have to grow some heels or whatever you want to call it, and you have to dig in and be like, no, this is what I want and this is what I need. And it's hurtful when people don't choose to step into that path with us, for sure.
It is.
Yeah. When you said, if you don't go, I don't go, I'm just curious, did you just have that brief moment like, oh, I want to take that back? What if she doesn't want to go?
You know what? I was so determined, but also just gassed. It was like, I have literally done everything I can possibly do.
Yeah.
Right down to like freaking talking to my dead grandmas as my angels, like, please line this up for me. I will do everything I can. Like, and I just felt all the crazy stuff that before I would have been like, that is such BS. But it was like I had this like crazy, surreal, emotional experience all the way through it. And one thought I do have is, if you have these emotional and relationship pains, take that anger to the gym. Like, put that emotion into motion. Like, that was such a powerful thing and outlet for me. And so many people go to the gym as their therapy.
Yeah.
And like anything, that can become very extreme, where it's like, oh, I just got in a fight, I got to go to the gym now to process these emotions. You know what I mean? And so there's kind of an extreme angle to that too. But it's like, hey, if you're going through a hard time, like I was in 2013, 2015, 2017, freaking all last year,
Yeah.
it's like, what can I control? And it's like me. So right now my body's so broken up, it's like walking is what I do. You know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, you could go walk for 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 steps and start reclaiming your life. You could be listening to good things. I mean, there's so many things that you can reclaim yourself without whoever's on the other side of the couch with you. And I would start with you. I mean, that's always going to be the case, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the responsible thing to do, right? Is to start with you, and then
I wanted my wife to change so I wouldn't have to.
Right. I think that's kind of how most think, right?
Totally. Like, that seems logical that you should stop yelling at me. Like, but I wanted all the passion that she brought, just not that piece of the passion. Does that come full circle?
No, right.
Like,
there is, right? Pick and choose.
Yeah, it's like, look, this gal's the full package. And there's some tagline, like something like, can't have all of me, or you can't, I don't know, if you can't have me at my worst, you can't have me at my best. Yeah. And it makes sense. Like, and so I don't know how we tie this together with your audience and giving a shift and all the things, but I'm definitely an example, or a human, where it's like, you have these pits and you have these peaks, and as soon as you hit that peak, there's going to inevitably be something else in your life. I almost call it like piles of gravel. It's like, as soon as I move all this gravel, there's another pile behind it waiting for me. And if we can start to accept that and accept the challenge of it and the personal growth and development, then we don't slip into that state of trying to avoid life. Does that make sense?
Don't avoid life. Give a shift. See, that is a perfect button and bow right there. I love that. So how can all of our wonderful listeners find you? Because let me tell you, we all going to be coming to the Glenn Lovelace Playhouse.
No, I hang out on there's lots of playhouses here. We got lots of kids. They got to be entertained. But GlennLovelace.com is the website. You can schedule a call with me. I do a free consult for men and women. So, One Day One Life podcast. Instagram is It's Your Wingman. And I'm actually noticed I've pulled away from Instagram a little bit. I don't want to, but I'm just kind of tired of what's there, right? But I do engage there, and I do respond to all my messages there. I do stand by your goal is my goal, and so there's a lot of resources I can share with people that will help them, from making money, starting online businesses, relationships, of course, even coaches. I give away probably 10 grand worth of PDFs on how to do strategy calls and how to create offers and all kinds of stuff. And my intention's not really to hire me to do all that. It's like, hey, I've paid for all this stuff. I've developed it. Like, if that's what your goal is, like, take this information and run with it. And so if people reach out, I usually have a connection to if they need help. But yeah,
That's
I love
fantastic.
what you gals are doing. So
and the resources they can find on your website, and correct, or reach out.
They can find me, and then if you want to text me, I have a texting number. They can text me. It's 385-269-80.
Okay. Make sure you send that to, if you don't mind, and then we'll make sure we put it in the show notes. And then do you have a book, any upcoming events, anything you want to talk about?
I have 2 events this week, actually. They're the first one since my accident, so I'm pretty excited about those. The one that I'm running, I'm calling it the 2M workshop. And if you've heard of Jordan Peterson, he talks about men becoming monsters. And it's almost like you're not dangerous unless you can feel all of these emotions and then process them. So he has a whole thing on that, and I would take up quite a bit of time going into it. But men are also, if they're God-fearing, they also are being challenged through the Bible to be meek.
Mm-hmm.
And so meek feels pretty weak.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's kind of like, you're telling me to be meek, and then you're telling me to be a monster. And it's like, what is it? So I'm running a workshop for that. The book will have this will likely be the cover.
Yes.
I hope it is. The publisher kind of gets to decide on that. The title will be either You've Never Been a Man Before, meaning with every season and phase of life, you're not going to know how to do it. And you're going to experience some fractures, or it'll be Heal the Boy, Forge the Man. One of those 2 titles will be the title. And I don't know, I hope I can finish it by June. So maybe late summer, the publisher will be done with it. But always treading into uncharted waters. It's like, figure this out along the way.
Like stocking stuffers, Glenn. So
let's get it done by.
I'm just gonna put this out there because I'm gonna shy. Oh, it's just fine. Like, maybe you kind of got backed into the fence because you have to finish your book. So I'm just
it's more true than you could imagine. Like, it's been on the list, and it's like everything else is pushing that in the back, and that needs to be in the front. And it's like,
well, you're preaching to the choir. Nancy's gonna be like, see, he said it to you too. So
I've never done this before, Nancy.
Years deep and still like 87. I call Nancy every week. I'm like, well, I have a new draft, and she's like, and that's nice. You know what it's done.
That's awesome. It's hard.
We're waiting.
It is hard, but it's it's like, just like we were saying, really, like, if it's important to you, you find yourself really making the time for it. And sometimes I believe that things do a pattern interrupt because it's going to bring something actually to the book at a later point that it might just not have been ready to be birthed. So there is a grace in there.
My publisher's like, she's like, Glenn, with the type of book you're writing, you will relive every damn word of that book, and it is going to suck. And she's like, the longer it takes, the longer you live in that suffering. And I'm just like experiencing it one black eye after another, So
this is an episode everybody should be watching on YouTube. So you can see
that made me think real fast of a friend I had. If he would had a bad day, and I'd be like, "Do you want to talk about it?" He's like, "No," and I'm like, "Why don't you want to talk about it?" He's like, "Why on earth would I want to relive a bad day?" And I'm like, "Oh, I never thought of it like that. Like, why would you? I want to hear all the things. But
we all think so differently. Love you guys. Thank you so much for
so much. You're the best.
And we will put in the show notes where everyone can find you. And for all our listeners, thank you for being here. Be sure to go and find Glenn Lovelace, your wingman. And also, we would love it if you would like and subscribe and share our podcast. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Bye, friend.